This is DHEA and Pregnenolone, and they cured my brain fog. DHEA and Pregnenolone are neurosteroids. Neuro meaning brain, steroid meaning hormone, so essentially a hormone that acts on the brain. Having tried pretty much every performance-enhancing drug there is and supplement on the market, I'm rarely impressed. But when it comes to DHEA and Pregnenolone, I was thoroughly impressed. You see, after years of anabolic steroid use, one day I realized I was feeling stupid. I stumbled over my words and my brain felt as foggy as a San Francisco morning. And this obviously concerned me a bit because my career obviously involves a lot of my brain, and if I'm not at full capacity, then I might hurt somebody. So I dove into the literature a bit and realized that anabolics and bodybuilding just in general are highly inflammatory and can lead to significant neurodegeneration. I needed to fix this damage. So after getting off all the PEDs, I did what anybody in their right mind would do and took to Dr. YouTube to figure out how I could fix it. After 15 hours, I'd made it through approximately one of Derek's videos, and I was left feeling more confused than I started. Either my brain fog was getting worse, or somewhere around the 10-hour mark of that video, I just got way too mesmerized by those delts and the back-to-back 10-syllable words. Just when I was about to lose hope, in my suggested feed was this wizard-looking man called Dave Lee, who had a video about neurosteroids and talked about him like he had a triple PhD in him.
I've worked and done a lot of research with Pregnenolone and DHEA, like a lot.
After using his protocols, I was able to reverse my brain fog and improve my cognition. And due to all the comments and messages I received from you guys, I know you guys have suffered with similar situations and you have a lot of questions about neurosteroids, so I wanted to get Dave on my channel. I just had to find him first. With that accent, I could tell he was either from Australia or New Zealand. I literally can't tell the difference between those two, but after some research, I found out he was from Australia. So all I had to do, fly out to Australia and find him. How hard could that be? I mean, there's probably not many 6'3" bald guys with Merlin's beard and a leather jacket walking around, right? After all, isn't Australia just filled with small pygmy people? Whoa, bro, chill. That is just a culturally insensitive myth. There is no evidence that says that there was ever pygmy people in Australia. You really need to cool it with this stuff. I mean, you're cussing on YouTube, talking about doing steroids. You're supposed to be a doctor. We're gonna get canceled. So you're telling me that Australians are just like you and I, but they just talk with a funny voice? I don't buy it. And dude, you chill. This is what the people want to hear. They're sick of their doctors being stuck up. Right? So I boarded a plane and took off down under. For 3 weeks, I braved the unforgiving Australian outback, facing treacherous terrain and wild creatures. Deep in the wilderness, I stumbled upon a mysterious shaman who, sensing my purpose, led me to an isolated ayahuasca colony. As I reluctantly partook in the mind-altering rituals, the outback came alive with surreal visions, blurring the lines between reality and hallucination. In the midst of this strange journey, I encountered eccentric characters from angry gators to perplexed kangaroos. The search for Dave Lee became a dramatic odyssey, weaving through the enchanting yet perilous tapestry of the outback. Finally, after being left in the desert for 40 days with no food and no water, right when I was on the precipice of death, Dave appeared, reaching out his hand and saying, "Good day, mate. You're now ready to learn about DHEA and Pregnenolone." That was like some messed up hybrid Australian-British accent. I'm no good at that. He gave me water, got me cleaned up, and we got on a plane and flew back to Texas, where I asked him, what exactly do neurosteroids do?
What neurosteroids do is they make your brain create the correct amount of neurotransmitters in response to stimulus. So as long as you're doing things that should feel the way they should feel, and you're putting the correct inputs in your body to support the production of neurotransmitters like nutrition and not creating excess amounts of inflammation which disrupt these pathways, is things that feel good should feel the way they're supposed to feel. And this is very important, I guess, for your subjective lived experience, that things actually feel the way they're supposed to feel. Because if you don't, you are going to be feeling anhedonic, which is where things that feel good don't feel good. But you're also going to be adopting behaviors based on things not responding to the way they should respond neurologically. Because the other thing that gets messed up when your neurosteroids are out of whack is oxidative stress and neural inflammation. And this can lead to racing thoughts, heightened stress response, inability to tolerate exercise, baseline anxiety state, hair trigger stress response to social stimuli, insomnia, brain fog, reduced verbal acuity, which I'm probably going to stutter over. No, I didn't. Nailed it. that leads to a very poor subjective lived experience for your consciousness. So you feel shit, and it will impact the trajectory of your behavior because you'll become more avoidant and less resilient. So you'll end up doing things that aren't good for you, and then your overall quality of life becomes very low. So neurosteroids are really important for modulating proper neurotransmitter expression.
For me, the symptoms of low neurosteroids were just a lot of brain fog and really poor verbal acuity. See, I knew what I wanted to say, but articulating the words to do so was nearly impossible. I kept stumbling over my words, and I just never fully could get out what it was that I was thinking. I tried all kinds of nootropics, and I ruled everything else out. So I finally ordered DHEA and Pregnenolone on labs, and both of those were in the gutter. But testing for these compounds can be super tricky, so I asked Dave to kind of try to elucidate that for us.
The first complication is pregnenolone testing is expensive and not available in a lot of countries. So idealistically, you just run a test and then you can work it out from there. But particularly if you're in the States, running pregnenolone is pretty easy. If you're in Europe or the UK or Australia, we really kind of have to look at proxy levels, like your progesterone levels, which are very imperfect, but better than nothing. And then we also have to look at your potential root causes and symptoms.
By the way, if you're getting any value out of this at all and like this style video, then hit that subscribe button. And I won't tell you to do it anymore. I fucking hate when people tell me to do it, but please do it.
It's important to firstly determine people's baseline concentrations of what's going on, and then also determine their symptoms, because hormones like pregnenolone and DHEA, the blood testing is not overly accurate. It fluctuates a lot day to day, and sometimes that means just getting multiple tests to get a more accurate measure. But the tests are useful when the levels are bottomed out, and a lot of the time when we're looking at pregnenolone, we'll be bottomed out if there's a deficiency. But neurosteroid deficiencies have a very wide range and, I guess, broad-reaching series of side effects when they're low, but there's also a lot of things that can cause the same symptoms that aren't to do with your neurosteroids. So just because you have the symptoms of low pregnenolone and low DHEA, you actually may have very robust levels. They may even be high. There could be other things that are causing those symptoms. So it's very important to ideally have testing and also have someone who is going to be able to give you a realistic treatment for these, because if you take too much pregnenolone and DHEA or testosterone, it can cause just as many problems as if you have too little. So there's definitely a Goldilocks zone when it comes to optimizing neurosteroid levels.
Now you're probably asking, what levels on labs should you try to reach? And I'm sorry for the shitty answer, but it truly depends. Just like some guys are fine with a 400 testosterone and other guys need 1,000 just to feel like they can function, with neurosteroids, no one size fits all. So either work with somebody who knows what they're doing, what they're looking for, or do self-experimentation, but use close monitoring with lab. But let's say you test and the levels are low. Where do you start?
The first thing you want to look at, just like with TRT, is if your levels are low, look at, is this because of something I'm doing, whether I need to put something in or take something out or change this or that. Because if you've got, chronic intractable pain, which is causing issues with pregnenolone production, or you've had a head injury, I mean, you can't unhead injure yourself unless you have a time machine. But if your pregnenolone and DHEA levels are bottomed out and you're maybe eating a very poor diet that's micronutrient devoid, or maybe you're sleeping 3 hours a night, or, using recreational drugs excessively, like these kind of things, maybe it's good to first look at what you can clean up to fix those production issues, because a lot of these things can often be traced back to diet and lifestyle. And if those issues are going on, they need to be fixed anyway. So starting with getting your ducks in a row and then seeing if there's still a symptomatic deficiency and a blood work deficiency, and then booking in with a doctor or health coach or provider who can go through your symptoms with you, go through your overall blood parameters with you, and actually make a diagnosis of that deficiency, and then optimize those levels, recheck to tweak the dose and make sure that your symptoms improve and that your levels are optimal. And then continuing to monitor over time, because those circumstances, those requirements, particularly as your health and circumstances change, they may also alter. So making sure that you get your levels correct, that your symptoms are resolved, that your treatment is optimal and healthy. And to do that, you need to work with someone who knows what they're doing with this, and then continuing to monitor that over time to make sure that that continues to be the right treatment for you.
One thing I'm often asked, and frankly don't know the answer to, is can I improve my DHEA and pregnenolone production through diet or dietary supplements? And, I just don't know. So since we have the wizard here, let's get his take on it.
Yeah, I mean, nutrition's going to be the foundation for all of this, because all of these, whether they are the hormones or the neurotransmitters or the enzymes or the processes, they're all made from like micronutrient building blocks. So deficiencies in anything will cause downstream dysfunction because the body will need to compensate and work around it. I think people should work on their nutrition absolutely as a foundation, but I also think that people should think twice, particularly around like mega dosing synthetic nutrients. One, just in terms of expectations, and two, in terms of throwing things out. But absolutely from a nutrition standpoint, making sure you're getting adequate vitamin A. I think the fat-soluble nutrients are particularly neglected in the diet, so making sure you're consuming a robust amount of fat-soluble nutrition. People will get their knickers in a twist and screech from the rooftops about whatever I say about nutrition, but I think egg yolks are a fantastic source of micronutrients. People will flip out about cholesterol. People will say that your body can make its own cholesterol. From what I've seen, eggs are a phenomenal way to support the body overall, particularly hormone production.
I completely agree with Dave here that we should not avoid cholesterol-dense foods like eggs, especially due to the massive amount of micronutrients found in them. The thing with dietary cholesterol is that most of us don't even absorb it, so it's not really an issue. The cholesterol that you take in through your mouth won't really impact the cholesterol that's in our blood that you see represented on your lab tests. About 20% of people do absorb dietary cholesterol, and if you're one of those people and you see that eating a lot of egg yolks in particular is elevating your LDL-C on your labs, well then maybe you may need to think about cutting out eggs, but for the vast majority of people, they're a very nutrient-dense food, and I would never recommend just blindly cutting those out unless you know that you're one of those people.
Find a way to get in a robust amount of bioavailable fat-soluble nutrients. I think egg yolks and red meat, grass-fed red meat, are a fantastic choice, but depending on what you believe, that may be subject to some controversy. I also think that omega-3 to omega-6 balance is something that people need to look at more. I think the seed oil debate is becoming a bit religious and culty at the moment. And I think that at the same time, there's a lot of people who think that all omega-3 supplements are rancid because of a study where a guy went to GNC and bought a few bottles of expired fish oil. People should read the whole study before they jump to a conclusion. But I think looking at the omega-3 to omega-6 balance is a very important foundation. I like high quality, high strength EPA DHA fish oil. Andrew Huberman's got some great videos talking about the importance of omega-3, particularly in the dosages that are used in these studies, which are, from my reading, about 2 to 4 grams of EPA DHA. And making sure you're getting enough protein, because amino acids are the building blocks for a huge amount of things in the body. And a lot of people are eating too many calories from energy and not enough calories from protein. So not everyone, I mean, bodybuilders are generally pretty good at getting enough protein, but for average people who are looking at their health and getting into nutrition, increasing the protein and reducing the carbs and fats is a really good place to start with nutrition, and then reducing low micronutrient per volume or per calorie foods and increasing micronutrient dense, ideally minimally processed food, I think is a very good place to look at. And I think the vertical diet's a great place to start if people want a template. There's a guy called Christopher Walker. He's got a template that he calls the thermo diet. I think that's a great approach as well. I think there's a lot of great ways that you can look at nutrition, but I think the cornerstone for that is eating more red meat and eating less hypercaloric, low volume processed junk food.
So you got your diet dialed in, you're eating plenty of protein and a lot of micronutrients, but you're still symptomatic and your labs still have low levels. Well, where do we start? The gold standard would be meeting with a physician who would ideally prescribe you a micronized version of DHEA and pregnenolone, but we don't all have that. So if we're going to go over the counter, what are some things that we should look for?
That's a good question, because a lot of the time people don't have access to a practitioner who will prescribe pregnenolone and DHEA, particularly internationally, but even if you do get a practitioner who will prescribe it, a lot of the time the amounts they prescribe are way too high. and that can cause problems. But ideally, you should be getting someone who is experienced, who can prescribe these through a pharmacy, because pharmaceutical grade micronized pregnenolone, DHEA, and melatonin are far superior because of how they will be digested and absorbed into the body, both in terms of a slower release, but also bypassing first pass in the liver. So pharmacy grade is always preferable. Someone who can prescribe it for you is always going to be preferable. But if that is not available, if you are going to use over-the-counter pregnenolone and DHEA, one, you need to have someone who is qualified, who can supervise this for you. Don't try to do it yourself. Still get the testing done. Still have someone steer that ship for you. Because the more you learn about this, the more you realize you don't know. The people who know very little are the ones who think they know the most. Understand that getting this wrong is going to be just as debilitating as not doing anything with it. So don't underestimate the nuance of this. Get someone who knows what they're doing to work, to supervise this. But when you do buy it online, it needs to be micronized and it needs to be from the best quality provider possible. So as of the time of recording this, MRM, M for Mary, R for Roger, M for Mary, they're on iHerb and Amazon. They're everywhere. They make micronized pregnenolone and DHEA. Nutricology is my preference. They make scored tablets. They make micronized pregnenolone and DHEA. I believe the brands Douglas Labs, Pure Encapsulations, and potentially BioVia, I believe they also make micronized products, but I haven't tried them. So I vouch for the MRM and the Nutricology brands, but ideally get it pharmaceutical grade in a micronized oral capsule. In terms of dosing, I mean, this is something that, again, not medical advice, educational only. You need to have someone look at your individual stuff and go through this with you who's qualified to do it. But when it comes to dosing, I think that 25 to 50 milligrams of pregnenolone or 10 to 25 milligrams of DHEA is a good starting point for an identified deficiency. I think if pregnenolone's bottomed out at undetectable levels, I think 50 is a better place to start, because in that case, 25 is going to probably not be enough to make enough of a difference. But always when in doubt, start low, go slow. So 25 is a suitable place to start as well. I found DHEA is stronger milligram per milligram than pregnenolone in terms of shifting levels and what most people need. But I've seen some people say that DHEA natural production levels are more like 3 to 5 milligrams a day. I'm not sure where that comes from, but when you look at the research on what dosages are actually used in interventions to restore youthful, healthy levels of DHEA in people who have deficiencies, it's between 25 and 100 milligrams. So I have found that sometimes people only need as little as 10, but a lot of the time people need up to 50. So 10 to 50 milligrams of DHEA tends to be the final dose for people. But I think with DHEA, because people are particularly prone to getting acne with it and it is stimulating, I think rather than going straight for what you think is going to be the required dose, is going for like 10, 15, 25, 50 and working up in 8 to 12 week increments and retesting, I think is a better way to do it, just to smooth out any side effects. And pregnenolone, I haven't really found people who actually benefit from the low doses of it. I know people advocate for it, but if you don't tolerate 25, you probably don't need pregnenolone, and you may get benefits from pregnenolone in low doses, but generally it's just going to cause high progesterone symptoms over time. Again, that's just what I've seen. So I would be looking at 25 to 50. A lot of the time guys need 100 preg, and I've seen guys need up to 100 DHEA and even up to 200 or more pregnenolone. But those tend to be the ballpark doses.
Another question that often arises is, how do we take these? Do we take them together? Do we take them separate, morning, night?
Pregnenolone and DHEA, I think, are best taken together. And that would put them into the morning with DHEA, because DHEA shouldn't be taken at night. There is a study that says that DHEA increases GH if you take it at night, but it will also fuck up your sleep. So that's just what happens in practice. But pregnenolone, if it's taken on its own, if someone doesn't need DHEA, I think it's better you take it at night, just because it is sedating, but I think they balance each other out well. But Yeah, pregnenolone can be taken day or night depending on how you respond. And if DHEA is taken, I think they should both be taken together in the morning.
What I often suggest is when you first get these, take a day that you don't need to do anything, probably like a weekend, and take it midday. See how it feels. If you feel drowsy, well, then you know that you're going to put them in the evening. If you feel amped and wired and energized from it, well, then put it in the morning. If you feel nothing at all, I would still put it in the morning because, as Dave said, they can mess up your sleep.
And if someone is going to use melatonin, again, I would use a micronized version, ideally get it prescribed. Quality of Life make a micronized version that's 5 milligrams. Otherwise, Life Extension make one called Microactive, and a whole bunch of other brands use Microactive as well, and they come in like a 1 or like a 1.2 milligrammer. But ideally, you want to get it prescribed, and I've seen a lot of people not tolerate normal melatonin or sustained release melatonin, but they don't get any of the side effects with micronized. And I also have found that micronized melatonin is very well combined with glutathione when taken before bed in like a reduced form, 500 milligrams to a gram, when people have gotten the clearance from their doctor, of course. And this tends to particularly improve sleep quality and wakefulness scores and just overall quality of life for people who've got intractable autoimmune conditions, chronic pain. But again, that's just educational advice to be discussed with your doctor.
Now, we looked out there on a little bonus on melatonin and improving sleep quality, but to go back to DHEA and pregnenolone, I think they're extremely important and often overlooked. Low DHEA and pregnenolone are often a side effect of PEDs, or sometimes even just TRT. And if you want to avoid other symptoms while on TRT or PEDs, click this video next.